Good afternoon. This is All India Radio. I am Valsa Williams and with me is Sarah Mujtaba with the Midday News. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addresses Udyami Bharat program in New Delhi, launches several schemes and programs and distributes national MSME awards. Government is making necessary policy changes to encourage MSME sector in the country, says Prime Minister, asserts that centre has increased budget by more than 650% in the last 8 years to strengthen the sector. Amarnath Ji Yatra begins with first batch of over 2,700 pilgrims leaving Nunwan base camp in Pahalgam in Jammu and Kashmir. PSLV C-53 all set to take off with 3 Singapore satellites from Sriharikota this evening. Rescue operation underway in Manipur to retrieve bodies of those buried in the landslide in None district. Met Department declares onset of monsoon in Delhi. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. sworn in as the next president of Philippines. In badminton, PV Sindhu and HS Pranoy storm into quarterfinals of Malaysia Open at Kuala Lumpur. And in Wimbledon tennis, Rafael Nadal and Katie Bolter to play their singles second round matches today. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said the government is making necessary policy changes to encourage MSME sector in the country. He added that the centre has increased the budget by more than 650% in the last 8 years to strengthen the sector.
आज पूरी दुनिया भारत की अर्थव्यवस्था की गति को देखकर प्रभावित है और इस गति में बहुत बड़ी भूमिका हमारे एमएसएमई सेक्टर की है। एमएसएमई आज मैक्रो इकोनॉमी की मजबूती के लिए भी जरूरी है। आज भारत जितना निर्यात कर रहा है उसमें बहुत बड़ा हिस्सा एमएसएमई सेक्टर का है। इसलिए एमएसएमई आज मैक्सिमम एक्सपोर्ट्स के लिए जरूरी है। एमएसएमई सेक्टर को मजबूत देने के लिए पिछले 8 साल में हमारी सरकार ने बजट में 650% से ज्यादा की बढ़ोतरी की है। हमारे लिए एमएसएमई का मतलब है मैक्सिमम सपोर्ट टू माइक्रो, स्मॉल एंड मीडियम एंटरप्राइज।
Addressing the Udyami Bharat program in New Delhi, Mr. Modi said the micro, small and medium enterprises MSME sector accounts for almost 1/3 of India's economy and it has a very important role in India's growth journey. He said the government has resolved to take local products across the globe and several initiatives have been introduced to strengthen the country's Make in India supply chain.
उद्यमेन ही सिद्ध्यन्ति कार्याणि न मनोरथै, यानी उद्यम करने से ही सिद्धि मिलती है, सिर्फ सोचते रहने से कुछ नहीं होता। इस श्लोक के भाव को अगर मैं आज के समय के हिसाब से थोड़ा बदल करके कहूं तो मैं ये कहूंगा कि एमएसएमई के उद्यम से ही आत्मनिर्भर भारत अभियान को सिद्धि मिलेगी, भारत सशक्त होगा।
Mr. Modi added, for the government, MSME means maximum support to micro, small and medium enterprises and said a self-reliant fund of 50,000 crore rupees has been released for the sector. The Prime Minister also asked MSMEs to register on the GEM portal for supplying goods to the government.
एमएसएमई की नई परिभाषा के अंतर्गत प्रायोरिटी सेक्टर लैंडिंग के तहत लोन का लाभ ले रहे हैं। मैन्युफैक्चरिंग और सर्विस सेक्टर के बीच के अंतर को भी दूर किया गया है। आज जेम के माध्यम से सरकार को सामान और सेवाएं मुहैया कराने के लिए एमएसएमई को बहुत बड़ा प्लेटफॉर्म मिल चुका है और मैं सभी आप साथियों से और आपके माध्यम से आपके एसोसिएशन को एमएसएमई सेक्टर में हो, आप जेम पोर्टल में रजिस्ट्री करवा ही दीजिए।
Mr. Modi said the government has decided that for orders up to 200 crore rupees, no global tender will be undertaken and this is in some ways a reservation for the MSMEs. He said under the Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme, the central government has ensured 3.5 lakh crore rupees for the MSMEs. Mr. Modi also said the government has taken the resolve to take local products across the globe and several initiatives have been introduced to strengthen India's Make in India supply chain.
इमरजेंसी क्रेडिट लाइन गारंटी स्कीम को अगले साल मार्च तक बढ़ाने की भी घोषणा की। जो भी इसके अंतर्गत आते हैं उनको भी 50,000 करोड़ रुपए से बढ़ाकर अब 5 लाख करोड़ रुपए कर दिया गया है, 10 गुना ज्यादा। क्यों आजादी के इस अमृत काल में हमारे एमएसएमई भारत की आत्मनिर्भरता के विराट लक्ष्य की प्राप्ति का भी बहुत बड़ा माध्यम है।
Talking about khadi, the Prime Minister said the turnover of khadi and village industries has crossed 1 lakh crore rupees and khadi sales have increased 4 times in the last 8 years. He said that difficulty in getting loans without guarantees was a major obstacle for the vulnerable sections of society to pursue the path of entrepreneurship. After 2014, it was decided to enlarge the ambit of entrepreneurship through Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas and Sabka Prayas. Mr. Modi added that Mudra Yojana has a formidable role to play in making entrepreneurship easy for every Indian. The scheme of bank loans without guarantee has created a large section of women entrepreneurs, Dalit, backward, tribal entrepreneurs in the country. He informed that about 19 lakh crore rupees has been given as a loan under this scheme so far. During the event, Mr. Modi launched the Raising and Accelerating MSME Performance RAMP scheme, Capacity Building of First-Time MSME Exporters scheme, and new features of the Prime Minister's Employment Generation Program, PMEGP. The Prime Minister digitally transferred assistance to beneficiaries of Prime Minister's Employment Generation Program for 2022-23. Mr. Modi also announced results of MSME Idea Hackathon 2022 and distributed national MSME awards. He also issued digital equity certificates to 75 MSMEs in the Self-Reliant India Fund.
In Jammu and Kashmir, the annual Amarnath Yatra commenced today as a batch of about 2,750 pilgrims started their yatra and left the Noonwan base camp in Pahalgam. The journey takes about 3 days with night halts at Sheeshnag and Panchatarni along the route. The pilgrimage was flagged off by Anantnag Deputy Commissioner at the Noonwan base camp in Anantnag district's Pahalgam. More details from our Jammu correspondent.
A large number of security personnel have been deployed for the pilgrimage. New security pickets have been set up and security along the Baltal and Pahalgam routes has also been beefed up. Drone surveillance and RFID chips are also being used for surveillance. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha today said that the Amarnath Yatra will be peaceful and pilgrims coming from across the country will go back happily after performing their yatra. Sri Amarnath Shrine Board has asked all intending pilgrims to carry Aadhaar cards or any other biometric verified document with them to ensure only bona fide people attend the yatra. Sri Amarnath Shrine Board has also made a provision for online darshan of the naturally formed ice lingam at the Amarnath cave. Nasir Rathar, AR News, Jammu.
The National Space Agency, ISRO, has said the countdown for today's PSLV C-53 launch is progressing smoothly. The rocket carrying 3 Singaporean satellites will be ignited at 6:02 p.m. from the second launch pad of Satish Dhawan Space Center at Sriharikota. 6 other tiny payloads will be riding piggyback on the launch vehicle. This would be the second commercial launch of the new Space India Limited, a public sector undertaking under the Department of Space. Another important feature is that the InSpace Central Agency to Regulate Private Involvement in Space has approved 2 Indian private startups to take their tiny payloads into space for the first time through this mission. More from our Chennai correspondent.
The 3 Singaporean payloads of the rocket PSLV C-53 include a small satellite for Earth observation called DSEO, a day and night imaging payload called NewSAR, and the Nanyang Technological University Students Nano Satellite called SCOOB-1. In addition, 6 nano satellites, including those of the 2 Indian space startups, will continue to ride piggyback in space on the last stage of the PSLV rocket, which is in effect its spent engine. Normally, the last stage of a rocket injects its passengers in space in an intended orbit and then simply retires in space itself. But this time, the ISRO plans to use the engine further by stabilizing it in an orbit. The 6 payloads sitting on it will be sending the data back to Earth. Such an use of the spent rocket engine is the ISRO's novel effort today. Jai Singh, AR News, Chennai.
India has successfully flight tested indigenously developed high-speed expendable aerial target Abhyas from the integrated test range in Chandipur off the Orissa coast. The performance of the aircraft at low altitude, including sustained level and high maneuverability, was demonstrated during the test flight. The target aircraft was flown from a ground-based controller in a pre-designated low-altitude flight path, which was monitored by various tracking sensors deployed by the ITR, including radar and an electro-optical targeting system. Abhyas is designed and developed by Aeronautical Development Establishment of Defence Research and Development Organisation.
Chief Minister of Rajasthan, Ashok Gehlot, is visiting Udaipur today. He is scheduled to meet the family members of Kanhaiya Lal, who was brutally murdered in the city. The Chief Minister will hold a meeting to review the law and order situation. Mr. Gehlot will also visit Ajmer, where he will meet the police personnel injured in the violent protest at Bhim in Rajsamand yesterday. Meanwhile, Jaipur and many other cities are observing Bandh today in protest against the dastardly murder. Despite a curfew, citizens took out a silent procession in Udaipur, in which thousands of people participated. Our Jaipur correspondent reports that protests are taking place at many places in the state against the incident.
There is a massive impact of Bandh in Jaipur. Most of the markets are closed except for essential services. Schools and other educational institutions remain closed. 2,000 police personnel and 8 companies of RAC have been deployed in Jaipur for security. Apart from Jaipur, some other cities of the state including Jaisalmer are closed today, while protests are taking place in many other cities. Curfew continues in Udaipur even today. People are suffering due to the suspension of mobile internet services in the entire state. Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot has said that there is an anger everywhere and people want speedy justice. He appealed to all the citizens to maintain restraint and peace. With Jitendra Dwivedi report from Jaipur, Manal Saeed, AIR News.
A meeting of the Maharashtra BJP core committee is underway at the residence of former Maharashtra Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis. Maharashtra BJP in charge C.T. Ravi, party leaders Chandrakant Patil, Girish Mahajan, Praveen Darekar and others are present in the meeting. Rebel Shiv Sena MLA Deepak Kesarkar has said their leader Eknath Shinde has left for Mumbai. Talking to reporters, Kesarkar said Shinde has assured them that whatever decision will be made, it will be for the development of the state. Before leaving from Goa, Eknath Shinde has made it clear that there was no discussion with the BJP about who and how many ministerial posts will be given to the leaders from his faction. However, he said the discussion on this aspect will be held soon. He appealed to reporters not to believe on the ministerial list, which is viral on social media. After the meeting with Eknath Shinde, the BJP is likely to meet the governor and stake claim to form the new government in Maharashtra.
You are listening to the Midday News on All India Radio. A reminder of the headlines before we move on. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addresses Udyami Bharat program in New Delhi, launches several schemes and programs and distributes national MSME awards. Government is making necessary policy changes to encourage MSME sector in the country, says Prime Minister. Asserts that centre has increased budget by more than 650% in the last 8 years to strengthen the sector. Amarnath Ji Yatra begins with first batch of over 2,700 pilgrims leaving Noonwan base camp in Pahalgam in Jammu and Kashmir. PSLV C-53 all set to take off with 3 Singapore satellites from Sriharikota this evening. Rescue operation underway in Manipur to retrieve bodies of those buried in the landslide in Noni district. Met Department declares onset of monsoon in Delhi. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. sworn in as the next president of Philippines. In badminton, PV Sindhu and HS Pranoy storm into quarterfinals of Malaysia Open at Kuala Lumpur. And in Wimbledon tennis, Rafael Nadal and Katie Boulter to play their singles second round matches today. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle at AIR News Alerts.
कंपटीशन की अगर आप कर रहे हैं तैयारी तो उनके लिए ऑल इंडिया रेडियो पर हम लाए हैं अभ्यास, एक ऐसा कार्यक्रम जिसमें आप पूछेंगे सवाल व्हाट्सएप नंबर 9289094044 पर या फिर ईमेल करेंगे abhyas.airnews@gmail.com पर और हमारे विशेषज्ञ देंगे इसका जवाब। आपका अभ्यास हमारा प्रयास।
बर्फ से ढके पहाड़, हवा के साथ झूमते चीड़ चिनार,
झीलों पर तैरते शिकारे,
हरी भरी घाटियों के दिलकश नजारे।
आकाशवाणी समाचार आपके लिए लेकर आया है जम्मू कश्मीर विशेष श्रृंखला एक नई सुबह।
हम बात करते हैं विकास की, निवेश की,
पर्यटन की, संस्कृति की
और रोज हो रहे बदलावों की। FM गोल्ड पर सुनिए हर शुक्रवार रात 9:15 पर आकाशवाणी समाचार की विशेष प्रस्तुति
जम्मू कश्मीर एक नई सुबह।
Welcome back to the Midday News. The nomination papers of NDA presidential candidate Draupadi Murmu and opposition nominee Yashwant Sinha have been found in order for the presidential poll. As per the Rajya Sabha Secretariat, out of 115 nomination papers received for the presidential poll, 28 were rejected on presentation itself. Out of the remaining 87 papers of 72 candidates, 79 were rejected for not meeting required criteria. In Manipur, rescue operation by SDRF and NDRF is going on relentlessly to retrieve mortal remains of those who were buried in the landslide that occurred in None district. Government officials are overseeing the rescue operations. Scores of people are reportedly buried alive due to the landslide that occurred last night at Topul Yard railway construction camp in None. Meanwhile, the district administration has issued an advisory to nearby villagers to take precautions and advise them to get evacuated at the earliest. It said the flow of Eze River has been obstructed by debris, creating dam-like water storage, which, if breached, may wreak havoc in the low-lying areas. Union Home Minister Amit Shah today spoke to Manipur Chief Minister Biren Singh and Railways Minister Ashwini Vaishnav in the wake of a landslide near the Tupul railway station in Manipur. In a tweet, Mr. Shah said the rescue operations are in full swing and a team of NDRF has already reached the spot. He added that 2 more NDRF teams are on their way to Tupul.
And now let's listen to our special program Azadi Ka Safar, highlighting the importance of the day during the freedom struggle.
आजादी का अमृत महोत्सव। आजादी का सफर with AIR News, birth of a nation.
India's glorious freedom struggle is one of the greatest struggles the modern world has ever witnessed. AIR News brings you a glimpse of the struggle every day.
On the 30th of June 1855, the Santhal uprising began. The indigenous tribe of Santhals from the then Bengal Presidency rose up against the British East India Company and the Zamindari system. The Santhal Hool, which started 2 years before the 1857 revolt, continued till November the 10th, 1855, when martial law was declared.
Santhals fought against the unjust revenue system of permanent settlement that exploited the community, surviving on forest products and the barter system. According to the Permanent Settlement Act of 1793 by Lord Cornwallis, landlords would have perpetual and hereditary rights over the lands demarcated under their jurisdiction until and unless they were able to pay the required land revenue.
Thus, to create this new class of zamindars, the British confiscated lands from the Santhals and other tribes. The Santhals had to serve these landlords who would take away a large chunk of their agricultural produce, leaving them with almost nothing. To sustain themselves, they borrowed from the moneylenders, who would lend at exorbitant rates to an already vulnerable and impoverished group.
Santhals were forced into bonded labor and, generation after generation, cultivated land to meet the demands of the British. Many had to work in indigo plantations or for the railway constructions that the British initiated.
brothers of the Murmu clan, Siddhu, Kanhu, Chand and Bhairav, along with their sisters Phulo and Jhanu, led the uprising against the blatant exploitations of the Santals. They organized thousands of Santals from neighboring areas after declaring that freedom can only be won by armed war.
As the uprising gained power, the company administration sent more troops to fight Santals, who in turn fought using their traditional weapons. The British put a prize money of 10,000 rupees for Siddhu and Kanhu, the prominent leaders of the uprising.
Santals lost thousands of their kin and tens of villagers as the war elephants destroyed their homes. The colonizers managed to suppress the uprising, and Siddhu and Kanhu were killed in action. However, the sacrifices of the Santals were not in vain. The uprising concluded with the issuing of the Santal Parganas Tenancy Act, which provided the people some protection from colonial exploitation. Regular police force was abolished and the village head was put in charge of maintaining peace.
On the 30th of June 1857, the Battle of Chinhut was fought between British forces and Indian independence activists during the First War of Indian Independence at Ismailganj near Chinhut, Awadh. The British were led by the Chief Commissioner of Awadh, Henry Lawrence, and the Indian activists were led by Barkat Ahmed, an ex-officer of the British Army. The Battle of Chinhut was one of the few major victories which Indian forces obtained in open combat with the British during the uprising.
The British force was greatly outnumbered by the Indian Independence Army by about 6,000 to 600. The Indians were in well-prepared positions behind stone walls in the village and inflicted heavy casualties on the British forces. The regiment's acting commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel William Case, was killed, as were several officers. Many of the British soldiers, especially Indian artillery men, also joined the Indian forces, overturning their guns and cutting the traces on the horses. The British were forced to retreat to the British residency at Lucknow.
That brings us to the end of this episode of Azadi Ka Safar with AIR News. See you in the next episode tomorrow.
In some more news, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has been sworn in as the President of the Philippines in Manila today. He succeeds his father, the outgoing President Rodrigo Duterte. Sara Duterte, the daughter of the outgoing President, is being sworn in as Vice President. The 64-year-old leader is inheriting a country still on the road to recovery from the COVID pandemic and an economic outlook clouded by skyrocketing inflation and rising debts. In his first speech as president, Mr. Ferdinand described his success as the biggest electoral mandate in the history of Philippine democracy. Israel is set for elections on the 1st of November as lawmakers dissolve the parliament today. It will be the fifth election for Israelis in less than 4 years. The Israeli parliament, the Knesset, voted 92-0, bringing an end to Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's run as premier, one of the shortest terms in Israeli history. Tomorrow, Foreign Minister Yair Lapid will take over as caretaker Prime Minister under the terms of a coalition agreement made between the outgoing Prime Minister and Lapid last year.
On to sports, in badminton, PV Sindhu and HS Prannoy have stormed into the quarterfinals of Malaysia Open in Kuala Lumpur. Sindhu beat Thailand's Pithayaporn Taiwan 19-21, 21-9, 21-14 in the second round clash this morning. She will next clash with Taiwanese Tai Tzu Ying in the quarterfinal. Continuing his dream run, HS Prannoy defeated world number 4 Chu Tien-chen of Chinese Taipei 21-15, 21-7 in the men's singles. He will now play Jonathan Christie of Indonesia for a place in the semis. The men's doubles pair of Satvik Sairaj, Anki Reddy and Chirag Shetty and former Commonwealth Games champion Parupalli Kashyap will also be seen in action today. In Wimbledon tennis, Rafael Nadal will play Lithuania's Ricardas Berankis in round 2 of men's singles this evening. The 36-year-old Spaniard is aiming to claim his first Wimbledon title since 2010. He has already clinched the Australian and French Open crowns this season. Britain's Katie Boulter will face Czech 6th seed Karolina Pliskova in the second round of women's singles. Yesterday, two-time champion Andy Murray suffered his earliest Wimbledon exit against American John Isner in the second round.
Indian boxers Simranjeet Kaur and Anant Chopre progressed to the quarterfinals of the Alota Cup at Nur Sultan in Kazakhstan on the opening day yesterday. Simranjeet pulled off a comprehensive win against local boxer Ishanova Nazim by a unanimous decision in the women's 60 kg bout. Ananta beat Mongolian pugilist Dorjin Yambu Gambold in men's 54 kg category by 3-2. Simranjeet will now square off against China's Xu Zishun and Anant against Kazakhstan's Altinbek Nur Sultan in the quarter-final matches. A 33-member Indian contingent, including 12 men, is participating in the event with 2 teams in the women's section. The Sensex and the Nifty today added marginally in the afternoon trade. Both stock indices rose amid negative global cues. The Sensex was trading above 53,150 points, while the Nifty was trading above 15,800 level. The Sensex gained 130 points to trade at 53,157. The Nifty was also up 15 points to trade at 15,814 when reports last came in. In the forex market, the rupee also appreciated 2 paise to trade at 78 rupees and 95 paise against the US dollar in afternoon deals. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman along with Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal today released the Business Reform Action Plan 2020 in New Delhi. In the report, 7 states have been identified as top achievers in the best performers category. The states are Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Haryana, Karnataka, Punjab, Telangana and Tamil Nadu. The Ministry of Commerce and Finance said that 20 states and union territories have institutionalized their central inspection system. It said these states also fully developed online systems and enhanced service delivery for improving ease of doing business.
The India Meteorological Department IMD today declared the onset of monsoon in Delhi. The national capital is receiving heavy rain, bringing respite from sweltering heat and humid weather. The city had been reeling under sultry weather since last week. Heavy downpour led to severe waterlogging in many areas of the city. IMD said southwest monsoon has advanced into entire Uttar Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, some parts of Rajasthan, entire Delhi, some parts of Punjab and Haryana today. Now let us have a look at the weather forecast for today. National capital Delhi will have generally cloudy sky with moderate rain. Mumbai will have generally cloudy sky with heavy rain. Chennai will have thunderstorm with rain. Kolkata will have a partly cloudy sky with 1 or 2 spells of rain or thunder showers. Visakhapatnam, Bengaluru, Hyderabad and Thiruvananthapuram will have generally cloudy sky with 1 or 2 spells of rain or thunder showers. Guwahati and Imphal will have generally cloudy sky with 1 or 2 spells of rain or thunder showers. Gangtok, Agartala, Kohima will have generally cloudy sky with a few spells of rain or thunder showers. Aizawl will also have partly cloudy sky with 1 or 2 spells of rain or thunder showers. Shillong and Itanagar will have generally cloudy sky with 1 or 2 spells of rain or thunder showers. And now before we end the bulletin, the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addresses Udyami Bharat program in New Delhi, launches several schemes and programs and distributes national MSME awards. Government is making necessary policy changes to encourage MSME sector in the country, says Prime Minister, asserts that centre has increased budget by more than 650% in the last 8 years to strengthen the sector. Amarnath Yatra begins with first batch of over 2,700 pilgrims leaving Nunwan base camp in Pahalgam in Jammu and Kashmir. PSLV C-53 all set to take off with 3 Singapore satellites from Sriharikota this evening. Rescue operation underway in Manipur to retrieve bodies of those buried in landslide in None district. Met Department declares onset of monsoon in Delhi. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. sworn in as next president of the Philippines. In badminton, PV Sindhu and HS Pranoy storm into quarterfinals of Malaysia Open at Kuala Lumpur. And in Wimbledon tennis, Rafael Nadal and Katie Boulter to play their singles second round matches today. And with that, we end the midday news.